Today we have an amazing panel on exploring job opportunities outside of academia, where professionals from government, industry, and nonprofit sectors will discuss their career experiences, share guidance on how to seek out non-academic job opportunities, and answer any questions from you guys, our graduate students that are on the call. So I want to give a quick rundown on the format of how today's panel will work. We know how panels work usually in person, so Zoom's always a little different. But we will start with just having the panelists take a few minutes to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their background in the industry. And then I will kind of get the ball rolling because we know it's sometimes awkward to ask questions on Zoom. So I have a couple questions that have already been submitted and I can go with those for a little while. So I'll ask a couple of questions that will help pull out some of those high-level themes or trends that we want to make sure we cover. And then we'll make sure that anyone that wants to ask a question can do so. If you do want to ask a question, I ask that you drop it in the chat feature of Zoom, and we can call on you if you'd like to ask it. If you'd prefer for me to just read the question to everyone, I can do that. But if you do want to ask your own question, please make sure you introduce yourself, tell everyone your name, your academic year, and the department that you are from. So again, if you have any questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try to get to those. So does anyone have any questions about how this will work? If you do, drop it in the chat because most of your all's videos are off.
Hannah, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yay.
Thank you.
All right, so with all of our sound issues kind of worked out, we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll start with panel introductions. Miss Blake, would you like to go first? You've got about 3 to 5 minutes to just tell us about your experience and your background. Miss Blake, do you want to go first?
Hi, this is Cheryl. Sure. And I apologize. I'm actually in North Carolina at the moment. I just got here Tuesday, just had new internet installed, and fair warning, I occasionally am getting a little unstable, and friends tell me it gets a little bubbly once in a while. But hopefully that resolves. I just missed just seconds of your intro there. Please just pile in and let me know. But I can go from here. Okay, so my name is Cheryl Blake. I'm a 1981 graduate of Kansas State University. I have undergraduate degrees in geography and in political science. And about 20 years after that, I did obtained a Master's of Public Administration from Auburn University, Security Studies from Air War College. And a lot of you, the U.S. Military Services does have an accredited degree granting program that's designed to provide senior level professional military education to military officers. But each year, certain government agencies and departments are able to select some civilian employees to attend. So I was fortunate to attend. And so you've probably guessed from that much of my career was focused on the government and the military. So I retired in 2017 and moved home to Manhattan, Kansas, but for the 33 plus years before that, I worked for an organization called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which we will call NGA because it is responsible for providing geospatial data and intelligence to US policymakers and to the military and to first responders. So we can think of that as data, maps, and imagery, whether that's from satellites or other platforms, and analytic reports that might help answer the questions what, who, when, why, and most importantly for us in big capital letters, where events are happening on the Earth. 33 years at NGA and one job, that might sound like a long time, but it's a big organization with a big mission, and I was lucky to have several very distinct phases in my career. I was hired as a cartographer to make maps, and at that time the agency was just starting to transition from a completely manual type environment to digital environment. Like we used to literally make maps by tracing the outlines of features in topography from satellite images that had been obtained by satellites dropping film into the middle of the Pacific Ocean that was picked up by the Navy. And it's hard to imagine those changes. Within just very few years at NGA, they sent me back to school for, yes, a third bachelor's degree in science, so that I could become part of the testing teams to make sure that the systems we were building were doing the right thing. We were digital signals from space, and then build data could be used to make and map products. So huge change. In another phase of my career, I was part of the organization that worked with apps and data to perform their missions, but all capabilities that could be included in military systems that were being developed. So the biggest example I have of that is when I worked on some specific map display capabilities that went into the navigation systems for US Navy ships and submarines as part of their overall modernization system. And then in the last phase of my career, it was really where I felt that my political science, geography, public administration, it all came together. Where for a time I was the deputy chief of the Economic and Environmental Security Division at NGA. So my division was responsible for producing intelligence reports for US senior policymakers up to and including the White House, as well as military leadership, on key strategic and humanitarian issues around the world. So for example, we might be looking at the expansion of oil and gas projects around the world that would be of strategic interest to the US. We might be looking at the development of dams and hydropower facilities that could lead to tensions over water resources and potential regional conflict in certain parts of the world. Sometimes we looked at crop health and potential for food scarcity or other food security issues around the world. We provided data that helped to understand and to help confine some of the oil spills after the Deepwater Horizon incident. We helped determine where landing sites could be for some of the relief missions to Haiti after the earthquake. My job was mostly in Washington, D.C., but I had a lot of opportunity for travel. My last assignment, I was very lucky to spend almost 4 years in Stuttgart, Germany, where I supported the U.S. Africa Command projects that we worked there, including doing some assessments that helped to determine the best locations for Ebola treatment sites. And we did some of the trafficability and route analysis that kind of helped predict where some of the main transmission corridors could be for the Ebola virus. So you can see these are all very meaningful events. And I will just always be thankful that in my long career, I had a chance to contribute in some small way to a lot of these kind of events that unfolded on the world stage. So that's me. And thank you again for having me. This is really exciting. I'm happy to see so many folks online. I hope you picked up most of what I was able to talk about.
Yes, I think we got it all. So thank you. We're excited that you're here as well. Okay, Dr. Iyer, would you like to go next? 3-5 minutes about your education and professional background.
Sure. Yep, thanks for having me. And this is a really great initiative, something I wish that it was there for me when I was a graduate at K-State. So I completed my PhD in microbiology back in 2012, and specializing in bacterial genetics and pathogenesis. After the PhD, I went ahead and completed 4 years of postdoctoral training. And then in the 4th year of my postdoctoral training, I was like, maybe research is not for me. So, so that's when I started looking for other options where I can use what I learned through my PhD, which is a very, challenging and a field which actually requires a lot of resilience, and you pick up a lot of skills during the course of your PhD. And I wanted to stay in science. So I looked to see what interests me more than doing bench research. And that's when I found scientific writing. So I started my own little business of scientific writing. I was a freelance writer for about a year. At the same time, I was a business development intern with Wistar Institute in Philadelphia. So what business development, as a business development intern, what I learned was that there's a gap in places where you need people to convey research to people that fund research. And somebody with scientific background is in a good position to kind of run that show. Again, another way of scientific communication. So with all that and that 1 year of freelancing, I accepted a position of a research analyst in a nonprofit called ECRI, which is evidence-based. It practices evidence-based healthcare. And I've been there since, and it's been 1 year and it's been a fun ride.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I know our grad students are going to pick up on that word resilient. So thank you. We're so glad you're here. All right. Mr. Karmacharya, would you like to go next? A little bit about your education background.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rajesh Karmacharya. So I graduated with a master's in civil engineering from K-State on May 2019. So it has not been that long. And actually today is my first anniversary at work. So it's been exactly 1 year since I started working as a professional in US. So before coming to the US for my master's, I finished my undergrad from Nepal in 2011. And for 5 years, I worked in a bunch of different areas in civil engineering. And finally, I decided to join K-State for transportation engineering, and my advisor during my master's was Dr. Sunanda Dissanayake. I think she's in this call as well. So after I graduated in May 2019, I moved to St. Louis with my wife, and actually she got a job before I did. So we moved here, and then I started searching for jobs, and now I'm working at Access Engineering. So most of my work include designing of transportation projects. That includes traffic signals, traffic safety, all the alignments and roadway design, from large projects to even like smaller drainage projects as well. So a bunch of different things that I got to learn. And after I finished my undergrad and before I came to the US, I worked in different like construction sites and survey and everything hands-on job experience. So going into academia was never in my plans. So I guess even after coming here and talking to so many people who pursued their careers as in academia, it never, like, I never changed my mind. It never had an appeal to me as industry job has.
Awesome. Thank you. We're glad you're here. I think I also saw that Mrs. Burns hopped on the call. So if you haven't figured out, we're doing 3 to 5 minute brief introductions on your education and professional background.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, yes. I have a general biology degree or Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Education degree, with which I then worked 4 years as an environmental consultant, working in the Clean Water Act regulations, waters of the US. And when I saw that I felt like I needed additional education to work in that field, I went back and got a Master's of Biology with an emphasis in stream ecology in 2002. And then I took off about 10 years with my family, and I'm now back in the field for the last 7 years, working as an environmental consultant with environmental regulations. And for the last 5 of those 7 years, I am the small business owner of my own consulting firm.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We are glad you're here. I was worried at first, but I'm glad you're here. All right, so we'll move to the first question, which Mr. Kamacharya already kind of touched on, but I think it's important. So what influenced your decision to pursue a career outside of academia? Was that always your plan? If so, why? That type of thing. So we'll start back with Ms. Blake.
Hi, okay. Well, similar to Dr. Karmachaya, I really never thought about academia as such. And even beyond that, I can say very specifically, even as a kid growing up in rural Kansas, for some odd reason, I always said I was going to work for the government. And maybe it's because when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents who told many stories about life during the Depression. And afterwards, as I think about it, you know, it's that word resilience again, that these stories weren't just stories about hardships. They were really stories of resilience and about groups of people getting together to help one another. And I suspect that's what influenced my grandparents to become such joiners. They were members of and belonged to nearly every civic type organization you can imagine. And they were just always volunteering their time and talent to help people who needed help. And I think I'm just lucky. For some reason, that just bred in me this real sense of service. And to me, going to work for a government organization sort of equated to a way that I could achieve that for myself and somehow give back. And it might sound a little corny, but that was kind of life. Sort of a parallel. I would say the other thing, I was really intensely shy, and I've gotten over a lot of that, but to be honest, the idea of standing in a classroom teaching, which is how I interpret academics at the time, was really kind of terrifying. And, you know, I have gotten over that, but it's sort of one of my lessons, I guess, that it's never too early to kind of start that self-reflection and self-improvement and put yourself on a path to self-improvement to really get to where you want to be. And, you know, for me, I do think that shyness and kind of that fear would have kept me from thinking more about academia, but I'm pretty happy where I ended up.
Yes, shyness and fear. I think imposter syndrome resonates deeply. So yes, thank you. All right, Dr. Iyer, what maybe influenced your decision outside of academia?
Yes, it was never a plan to stay in academia with me too, to begin with. Before I started my PhD, I was working as a scientist in a biotechnology firm back in India. So the idea was, finish your PhD with all the amazing research experience you get, you will, you know, immediately jump into an industry position, doing amazing research, solving all the world problems. But fair to say that doesn't happen. That really doesn't happen. So during the course of my PhD and postdoctoral training, what I realized was I was having more fun learning, understanding, analyzing, and discussing science than actually doing science. So that's what made me, but having said that, to come to that decision was not easy, because 5 years of PhD, 4 years of postdoc, 6 years of research before that, all that put together is preparing you for an academic research career, or a research career, not just an academic career. But to decide that you don't want to do research anymore, it's like deciding you don't want to be associated with something you thought you are, you know, that's what you grew up with. So yeah, the plan was never to stay in academia, but the plan was to stay in research, which is what I changed after deciding that I think it'll better be served, science will be better served by me if I'm actually conveying it rather than doing it.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's a hard decision that some of us will have to make. So yeah. Mr. Karmacharya, you already kind of mentioned this. Do you have anything you want to add about why you chose a career outside of academia?
Yes, so after my undergrad, when I started out working, so I was, 19 or something like that. So obviously teaching was way out of the question. And I was just trying to gain some experience. And when I got into construction and surveying and design of bridges, all the civil engineering work, so it felt so good when you plan something, actually, like you are a part of a team who plan something, like design something, and when you actually see that design come to life, it feels so good. And all the things that you've learned during your undergrad or grad, like all the courses that you took, all the theoretical knowledge that you gained during your course of study, like implementing that in real life and having an output, seeing that part being built and coming, like being useful to people, that felt really awesome. So as soon as I finished my undergrad and started working, my heart was always set to work in an industry. So I guess that never changed even when I did my master's. And I never had an idea about doing a PhD and going into academia.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Mrs. Burns, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I work primarily as a field biologist, and while a PhD is nice to have in that field, it also can price you out of competitive bidding. A lot of times PhDs require a higher hourly rate. And just on the side of being competitive with project scopes, one thing I do like about my field is that it's the application of scientific findings. When we talk about doing wetland restoration work, or when you're defining what wetlands are, or waters of the U.S., there's new findings that you can implement in your decision-making process that I think is a great challenge and I really love to do. So I would say, as far as getting into academia, I also use the skills that I've developed through my master's in education to teach my clients and fellow consultants about the changes in environmental regulations. So there is a lot of education that I already do, which I really enjoy, communication and conveying new ideas.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I think we're off to a good start. We'll go on to the next question, which is, how did you decide on your first job after graduate school? Were you looking at things like work atmosphere of the company, the specific job description, maybe the company's broad overall objectives, or was it just a matter of they advertised something that sounded interesting? So how did you decide on your first job after graduate school? And we'll start with Miss Blake again.
So I just have to remind everybody that my timeline was so long ago. You know, this was like 1981, then 1984. I did actually start a graduate program at Syracuse that I didn't finish. So again, another reason, don't use me for a role model, although I made up for it later. But you know, it was time for a job. And at that time, with degrees in geography and political science, and I've always sort of identified a bit more as a geographer. To be honest, there weren't a lot of opportunities outside of either academia or government. You know, there was no GIS industry as we know it now with the with those kind of capabilities. And, you know, here at Kansas State in the geography department, there was a little bit of a pipeline to what became the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. There's a big production center in St. Louis. So I certainly had friends that started there and I knew about it. But in that sense, you know, because of, I sort of lucked out with my experience, I think, ending up at a place that I really liked for all of that time. Sort of in retrospect, looking back at my experience, some of the key things that I think made that lucky, that I would advise people to think about, are just, you know, think about the overall goals of the organization, and if that's consistent with sort of your personal view, that might be a good fit, because you know, if you're lucky, you'll see the exact dream job written for you. But oftentimes there are a lot of outside constraints that sort of make that impossible. And I look at my own experience as a hiring manager, where so many times I've looked at resumes, and the big example I have is like, oh, I would love to put this person on the Russia oil and gas team, but there just wasn't a vacancy. But, you know, in this example, I could put them in on a Sudan gas team, and, you know, they did very well, and they weren't that happy not using their Russia expertise, but they were just very proactive. They really took a very teamwork oriented approach and found ways to contribute beyond just the subject matter, with bringing in new capabilities, volunteering for other assignments. And you know, because they knew that that opportunity was there to get back into their real area they wanted to work, they found other ways to be productive and to contribute. And sure enough, then like a year and a half later, when the team lead position opened up on the Russia team, they were in a perfect spot to be able to take advantage. So it didn't particularly apply to me, but, you know, I've seen that happen, that just be aware of what the overall goals and philosophy are. And if there's a fit, there will probably be a way to make it work out for you.
Awesome. Thank you for that view from both sides as the employee and employer. Dr. Iyer, how did you decide on your first job?
Before I venture into that, I must say, Cheryl, everybody can learn a lot from that. You started again after Syracuse and went after what you wanted. It's a big lesson everyone can learn. So there's a little bit of difference in my case because I'm from India, I'm an immigrant. So that the requirement of a work visa, all that plays a central role in the decisions we make in the beginning of our careers. Well, let me not generalize. The decisions I made in the beginning of my career. So my first role after graduate school was a postdoc. And at that time, I didn't know better. I thought after PhD, well, I have to do a postdoc. What else can I do, right? So I went and did a postdoc. I had 4 postdocs, 4 years of postdocs in 3 labs. So every time I went, the thought process was, will this project place me better when I go out, when I eventually am able to work in an industry position? Will this project place me as somebody who can translate research, basic research to application-oriented research? But during that time, what was happening was you tend to get stereotyped, especially when your background is basic science. So if you do one kind of work, that's the kind of work you eventually get. So that kind of stunted, to some extent, the kind of projects I was getting. Not that I wasn't enjoying any of the projects I was getting, but that is what it was. So then the first move that I made was to start my own scientific writing business. So when I made what influenced me to start on my own was everybody coming and telling me I don't have the experience to join somebody else. So I was like, you know what, let me get my experience then. So I started my own work and started, literally in the beginning, it was like, seriously, I'm spending 4 hours writing a report and you're paying me $20 for it. So the starting is rough, but then as you build your profile, eventually people start noticing you and then you go where you have to go. So the one thing I looked for in the current position I am right now was what kind of impact am I making in the healthcare field? Because that was the idea I started my PhD with is that can I make a difference to people? Can I make a difference in the medical field? And considering that where I am right now is a nonprofit organization that works for evidence-based medicine, it was a perfect fit. And the team, I like my team. So those are the 2 things, people and work.
Awesome, thank you. That entrepreneurial spirit, I think we all need a little bit of that. Okay, Mr. Karmacharya, do you have anything you'd like to add about what you looked at for your first job out of grad school?
Yes, so after I finished my grad school, as Dr. Iyer mentioned, it's a bit different for international students. I'm still in F1 visa, so there's so many restrictions when it comes to you need to have a job, you cannot work for a certain time period, you need to have an EAD card, and there are a bunch of stuff like that. But after I moved to St. Louis, I was just focused on St. Louis. Like I needed to find a job in St. Louis because I wanted to stay with my wife I didn't want us to stay in two different cities and work. So I applied to all sorts of civil engineering jobs to begin with when the application process started. But after I got multiple interviews and then got offered jobs at a bunch of different places, I selected the Access Engineering where I currently work at because it's a small firm and St. Louis based. It's not a big firm. Well, my wife works in a big firm, and I can see the difference. Like the work-life balance in a small firm is really good. And this is just based on the experience that I have and what I see how my wife works. That's just like I don't have. That's not a generalized or a big sample size. I'm not like speaking in based on a big sample size. It's just me and my wife. So selecting Access Engineering was, I think, the best move that I've made for my career. So it's a really small firm, just 15 odd people working here, and the majority of them female. And the work environment is really good. And that felt like I felt that the first time I came here for an interview. It was one male and two female who took my interview. And the way they were taking an interview, it felt like we were having a conversation, like at a coffee shop or something like that. It did not feel like an interview. Like I've been to around 10 interviews. I had been to like 10 interviews at that time. And this was the only one I'd say it felt easy. And after I joined here, it feels like a family. Like you just don't have a bad day. Every day is fun. Everybody works, but still everybody has fun while working. So this has been like, I think it just meant to be, and I was lucky in that sense. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I definitely think spousal, family, and workplace environment are important to everybody. Mrs. Burns?
Okay, can you repeat the question just to make sure I'm sticking to
Yeah.
it?
How did you decide on your first job after graduate school? So did you look
Okay.
at workplace atmosphere, job description?
Okay, here's some thoughts I want to share there. I want to say a little bit more about what Cheryl said. She started something and then stopped. I actually spent a year doing a PhD program in microbiology in St. Louis when I figured out that was not the field for me. So just to reiterate, you may get started into something you may not feel like you like or you do as well in. And I'm so glad that I'm doing field biology. I'm not a lab person really. But your question really excites me because I want your students to understand that the people that they are working with now or that they're taking classes with can have a really big influence on their life. Because I got into this field because a friend of mine that I knew as an undergraduate had joined a business that was starting up. This was back in the 90s when companies were figuring out that they needed assistance with some of these environmental regs. It was when waters of the US were first becoming implemented for any developers. And so I was finishing up a master's in education in Texas, and he called me up and said, hey, do you want to come work for us in this small company? And I was like, well, you just can't say no really to a job that just kind of falls in your lap. So I did, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and it had to do with someone I knew. And then I told you the middle part there. Now, as far as getting back into this field, again, I was home with kids, and I had a friend who had a lot of work coming her way doing endangered species surveys, and I knew her from my graduate work in biology, stream ecology emphasis at the University of Arkansas. And she knew what kind of worker I was. We worked together as graduate students, helping with some of the principles of biology classes and being a graduate assist and things like that. So that kind of jump started me back into the workforce. And we have had the best time. Like, I'm sorry, the fellow before me, how do you say karmacha, as far as the atmosphere and the people that you work with, because it's an all-women field team. We have the most awesome time just hanging out after we get our field work done or doing our field work. It's just something really unique to me that I see. So I can't say that I've had to look very hard because people have contacted me and to get where I am today.
No, thank you. Yeah, I hear redirecting and women. Yay. So that's good. All right, we'll go on to our next question. And this is, some students are not familiar with the types of jobs available outside of higher education. What recommendations do you have for them to learn more about the diverse employment opportunities available to master's and doctorate degree holders? So we just heard Mrs. Burns say a little bit about talking to people. They will come to you. Ms. Blake, do you have anything to add for that one?
Well, I guess, first of all, I have to mention the KSU Career Center. Hopefully there's someone involved or that works with you on your council from the Career Center. They weren't really around, at least that I know, while I was an undergraduate there decades ago. There was probably something, but I've been so impressed in the last few years, and I know that even I've been working with some of the people there at the Career Center to make sure that they have the right contacts for my former organization and things like that, if there are students that come in those types of interests. So I think that's a great resource right there. But I would also say just be familiar with the professional and academic organizations in your field. In my case, as a geographer, that's groups like the Association of American Geographers and the American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, and even some corporate groups, like again in geography, the company ESRI is one of the leaders in the field of geographic information systems, and they have an annual conference each year that draws people from industry, from academia, from government at all levels and internationally. And it just is such an opportunity to learn about the people that are involved in these fields and the types of projects and initiatives that are going on. So, you know, if you talk to the leaders in your academic departments, there could be opportunities for you to get some help to travel and present and participate in those conferences. But at the very least, you know, find them on the internet and follow and see what's going on. But the third thing I want to mention is talk to your department about what's going on with alumni. You know, I feel very happy that Dean Shanklin and others asked me to participate here today, but I'm also a member of the Alumni Advisory Council within the Geography Department. So every year I come back and talk about my NGA experiences with current students in geography. I know my fellow alums come and do the same thing, talking about their companies. If such a program doesn't exist in your department, you know, ask or see about setting it up, some kind of series of little brown bag luncheons, because there are a lot of us out here that are still really grateful to K-State for all that we've accomplished and are looking for ways to give back. And I'm always happy to help with to help talk to people and help make some of those connections. So look for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being such a good alumnus. I never used the correct word. Dr. Iyer, do you have anything, recommendations for jobs outside academia?
Sure. The first thing I'd like to tell is that don't box yourself. There is nothing, you cannot go out, look for a job that is catering to a master's or a PhD. You think you have to figure out what are your skills, what is it that you're good at, and what would you like doing, and then find a job that fits that criteria. It may not be advertised for, so I can say that I'm from a molecular biology background through and through. All I have ever done is DNA, RNA, protein extractions, purifications, Western blots, animals. That's all I have done. So if I had to look at a job profile and go, do I fit here? I would probably not find a job that would fit my skills, my direct skill set. So the idea here is know what you want to do and then look at the job description and say, really, how will you fit the job description if you like the job so much? So it's always always think about it as a two-way process. You are not going to fit into the job by itself. The job has to also reciprocate. It's a two-way street. So Always think about what you want to do, and then there is Google. It is all you have to do is jobs PhD and master students can do, and it will give you a list of things that you can do. But one thing you will find in that list is that you don't have to have a master's or PhD to do that job. A person who has done research for a long time doesn't necessarily have to have a master's or a PhD. That person will also fit into that role. So I think the biggest problem I had when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do was when I saw a job that I liked, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this. Wait, they won't even look at my resume then. So instead of that, I was like, oh, I have this. How can I explain that I have this despite my resume speaking RNA, DNA, protein? So it's, don't block yourself. Don't put yourself in a box. Instead, expand yourself and do a Google search. It will give you all the answers you want.
Awesome, thank you. I think we all know the power of Google for our degrees, so awesome. Mr. Karmacharya?
Well, I don't have much to add to whatever Ms. Blake and Dr. Iyer already mentioned. What I'd like to say is don't just be bound by what degree you have. I mean, as with experience from Ms. Blake and Ms. Burns, you can start at something and then you can change it midway. I mean, you can start at any stage of your life. So just see out there, go out to the real world, and find something that you really enjoy doing. And believe, like in most of the cases, almost 99.9% of the cases, there will be a job out there to that specific field which you enjoy like thinking about or which you enjoy working at. So that's just it.
Awesome, thank you. Mrs. Burns, any recommendations for learning about diverse employment opportunities?
That's one thing that I really like to talk to students about. I have a little bit more than just doing this consulting work. I worked as a seasonal park ranger, so there's all kinds of other areas that are similar to what I do. In fact, some national parks actually have biologists on staff to take care of their natural resources. So in some ways it's similar, just kind of different. But one thing I like to do personally as a member of the Society of Wetland Scientists, I'm a State of Arkansas Education and Outreach Coordinator, is to schedule times to speak to classes if I can connect with a professor at a university. And I don't care what school, I'm really wanting students to understand the options out there. So I give a presentation in a 45 minutes to an hour talking about the field of environmental consulting, how they can get in with companies and what they need, the skills, the basic skills you need to get in with environmental consulting firms. So that's just something I have a passion for, to help students understand their options out there to do the same or similar work to what I do.
Hannah, may I just add something here?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other thing I just wanted to mention from what I got from Jody is that once you Google it, once you find out what kind of things you have or you want to do, the other thing is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is your friend, at least in this time where you have to be stuck to a computer. LinkedIn is your friend. So if you don't know what that position or that role is, whether you will fit in it or whether you have the skill set to go there, look up the job, search it on LinkedIn and find somebody. And if you approach them asking them, hey, I have similar background like yours and would like to see a career like yours, could you spend a few minutes to tell me, will this be a fit or how does this work? 8 of 10 times they will respond. If not, there are too many other people there. You can reach out to them, but always reach out to them, be polite and offer something and then ask in return at their time. So LinkedIn is another way to learn what a role is all about if you would fit in there.
And I use LinkedIn a lot to connect with people. That is a really big part of my professional duties, really, to be known and to get to know people.
Awesome.
And could I add one more thing also?
Yeah.
It's related to research opportunities there at K-State. And, you know, hopefully at the graduate level, a lot of people have found ways to become involved with different research projects that are going on across the campus. But I know people that, you know, they're engaged in the research, they are really love the topic, the subject of what they're doing, but sometimes they don't think a step beyond that to why are we doing that here at K-State? What's the driver? What's the funding source for this research here? Oftentimes there are corporations or government agencies that are involved in working with the university on particular research projects because they're working with those groups to try to maybe answer one particular part of an overall problem. And if you really start to pull the string on that, you might uncover, you know, that there's a path or a network of these organizations that are involved that, again, could just give you an opportunity to see what some of the different aspects of the problem set are that are out there, different contexts to follow up, like some of the other folks on the panel have talked about today. So just things that are already going on at K-State can really be a good lead for you to follow to learn about other things that are going on.
Thank you. That was a really good answer with some actionable items that our grad students can take. So thank you guys. All right, so the next question is kind of about skills and getting these particular skills. I'm going to combine two questions into one because I think they're pretty similar. So basically is as graduate students, we know communication, presentation skills, synthesizing ideas for our projects, and networking are key skills for any kind of job. But are there other skills or experiences outside of our graduate program that you think will make us more versatile and stand out to employers? All right, and we'll start with Ms. Blake again, if she's ready.
Okay, well, I can't speak to whether or not these are really outside of the graduate program because I probably haven't paid enough to exactly what's involved in being a graduate student at K-State these days. But I guess some things that I would think of that are sort of outside of what I would call the subject matter expertise or topical area that I think were important for me. One of them was just realizing that you enjoy being a student and continue being a student, and just because you graduate from somewhere and you have your degree, it doesn't mean that you're finished with being a student. There are always things to learn. You'll be going into new situations where there's a lot to, you know, to pick up about those circumstances from the organization itself. And just recognize that it's always learning opportunities, continue to be willing to learn and to apply that to whatever your new situation is. Another thing I've already alluded to for me personally was that, you know, building into your routine some of that time for self-reflection and self-improvement and kind of being willing to be a little self-critical and looking for areas where you can improve. And for me, that was time management, and I've already kind of talked about the just to help you understand what your obstacles are that might help you be more comfortable or perform better indeed in your future, become better sooner, is just in the area of project management. And that means, you know, again, some of it is taking time to sit back and really think what the strategic objective is. And this doesn't just apply to work, you know, it can be any aspect of life, but really think about what the strategic objective is, but then kind of break that down into manageable pieces so you do have some achievable goals, and that will not only help make you feel better that you're making progress, but it sort of automatically gives you a tool to be able to communicate what some of your accomplishments are, what some of the roadblocks might be to achieve those goals, and to be able to communicate your progress to others and find ways to take credit for achievements. Because sometimes when you just look at the big goal out there, you have a hard time saying, well, I've really done this and this and this, and taking credit and communicating that is really valuable. So those are just a couple of things that I think about that have helped me.
Awesome, thank you. Project management and self-awareness, very important. Dr. Iyer, anything you would like to add?
Enjoy your grad school, because thinking about communication and everything, all that will happen. But the things you can do in grad school, you can only do in grad school. After that, it is a professional life, and that's how it's going to be. One of the important things I would like to say is that when we say communication, we are always talking about communication with respect to our work. But what is more important to know is that we can communicate our work. We are so involved in it, we are so knee deep into it, that we can talk about our work all day long. But the point is to talk about your work to an audience who doesn't know about your work. So you need to develop the communication, the confidence to communicate your work in a language that can reach people. So when I'm a big fan of presentations, and wherever you want me to talk about my work, I will be there talking about my work. So presentations, and participate in the different student organizations you have on campus. Because you learn skills, you learn to manage people, because the project management skills that Cheryl was talking about, it comes in handy when you're a part of a student organization, when you're in leadership roles. You know when you're working in your lab, you have your team, I keep going back to lab because that's my that's my background. So when you're in your lab, it is you, your PI, your 3 other researchers around you. That's your little bubble. But just communicating with them is not all you need. So go out to your grad school, join organizations, take leadership roles. You will be scared. It's not easy to do those roles. It's not easy to tell somebody, especially it is very difficult to speak truth to power. You can't tell somebody senior to you, hey, maybe this is not right. Maybe we should do it the other way. Those are the skills you learn when you go outside your little lab and learn things. At the end of the day, enjoy your work, because then you will actually be able to tell, when you're actually telling people what you do, there will be more enthusiasm. It will be infective. Other people will actually know you actually liked what you did, instead of just parroting what you did. So do more than things outside your lab. Dedicate your life in lab. I know that 24/7 I used to be in the lab, but go outside your lab, and because you can learn a lot from people that are not your immediate peers.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug for the Graduate Student Council for any of our grad students looking for leadership or project management. Organizing this panel in and of itself is project management. So yeah, plug for leadership opportunities. All right, Mrs. Burns, would you like to add anything?
Yes. I'm going to say something real basic. You're looking for, if you're going to stand out to an employer, be very dependable. Say what you're going to do what you're going to say. Show up when you say you're going to show up. I was just speaking with a friend of mine who said, yeah, we were kind of discussing someone else, and they said, yeah, they don't always show up when they're supposed to, and they don't end up getting the work. And so that's a real basic thing. Have a positive work attitude when you're working for somebody. Don't go in there complaining. You can say it in your head, but it doesn't have to come out your mouth. Okay. Ask for feedback from your associates about how you can improve. I think they touched on that briefly. One thing that I think you can come out of your graduate program, or even maybe an undergraduate with, is some levels of professional certifications if you look at certain programs. And I'm thinking of 2 specifically. I know I went to this conference last year, and a fellow was saying he tried to get his students where they would go ahead and apply for these certifications, so that when they were applying for jobs, they already had some paperwork that showed they were making extra effort to qualify or to learn new things all the time. And the 2 I'm going to talk about is there's an association, there's a wildlife biologist. I'm not as familiar with this one as I am the second one, but like there's an official certified wildlife biologist certification, and there's an associate wildlife biologist certification. And then the second group I'm talking about is Society of Wetland Scientists. We have a wetland professional in training, and I know you can meet that with quite a few of your coursework. The next level, which is professional wetland scientist, has to do with numbers of years of experience and continuing education. So usually the first level of these certification programs has to do with what education you have, and then you build on it with years of professional experience doing the work. So consider looking at the courses you've taken and see how they meet these certification programs as you are finishing graduate school or even undergraduate, depending on the type of courses that you've taken. That's what I would encourage you to do.
Awesome, that's great advice. Those additional certificates can go a long way. I also want to take a minute just here. It's like I'm in the middle of all of my questions. Just remind our grad students that you guys are welcome to drop questions in the chat. So it doesn't have to just be me asking all of our pre-submitted questions. We did just get one in the chat that's asking for some Mrs. Burns to repeat the name of the certification program in the chat. So if you'll just type that in for us, that would be great. Okay, so we've already kind of touched on this next question a little bit too. Dr. Iyer mentioned LinkedIn, but the question is, where can I meet people in my non-academic careers of interest? What is a good way of connecting with these professionals? And Ms. Blake, you get the honor of going first again.
Well, I thought about this question and honestly was having a hard time thinking of other add to what I talked about before in terms of just being familiar with the organizations, the academic and professional organizations that are active in your area of interest, and just digging in and doing a little research about what's going on in the who's who, and then, you know, being a little proactive in terms of finding either opportunities to get there to some of those meetings, submitting research or publications to be considered for some of their documentation, for their publications. And, you know, the idea of just using Google and LinkedIn, and don't be shy, you know, reach out and find people. And then I do really think there's a huge value. I've been so impressed with what's going on in the world of research at Kansas State over the last few years, and all of the research opportunities at not only the graduate, but starting at the undergraduate level for people to get involved. And just that being curious about what the drivers are and who's involved, the organizations who are involved, just go for it.
Awesome, thank you. Dr. Iyer, you've already given us Google and LinkedIn. Do you have any other suggestions for us?
With the current climate, I'm not sure how many in-person events happen, but one of the things that couple of things that helped me were meetups. So it's a networking platform called Meetup. And you can basically find if there are any meetups happening in your area with people that are pharmaceutical company, people that work in pharmaceutical companies, or people that work in the area that interests you. And I keep harping on everything medical because that's my background. So in the area that you're interested in, you find a meetup and go, and one of the things that actually I really liked doing was to go for meetups that are not my area dependent, like not my work area dependent. So there I get to know people, because there you build your connection, that person, when he hears about a position in something remotely related to what you do, you will stand out to them, saying, oh, hey, wait, I know somebody who's kind of looking for something you like, maybe I can connect you to that person. So it's called Meetup. But the other thing is, when you go for conferences, don't limit yourself to just sitting and listening to talks. There is a whole floor of vendors that are there to showcase their instruments and their scope and things like that. Go mingle with them, talk to them. Because those are places where you'll be surprised that for somebody who has not been in lab for that long, when you start talking to somebody like that, they are so interested in your work that you get to showcase how awesome you are. At the same time, make a contact with a person who's in a company to whom you can write a note and say, hey, I saw this position. Could you tell me more about it? So that is another place. And pretty much just picking up that was the most difficult part for me, was just to show up and talk to people randomly, just go start talking to people in a meeting, and introduce yourself, be your own PR machine, because who else will do it?
Exactly. Thank you so much. Mr. Karmacharya, anything to add about where to meet professionals in your area?
I guess LinkedIn and Twitter is the go-to thing, especially in the COVID world. But even if everything was normal, LinkedIn and Twitter would be the go-to social media to meet people, and you can meet all people from all different fields, and working as an executive to someone who's just starting out. So you can talk to a lot of people. And there are lots of Facebook groups, I'd say, whatever you want to, like for civil engineering, I can find so many groups and I can just get in and talk to people, talk to professionals, not just in the US, but all around the world, talk to them about anything related to civil engineering. So I just say stick to social media, and I don't think conferences are going to happen in the near future in the near future. So I'd say just Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, anything social media.
Yes, thank you. I just found out Twitter can work. I tweeted a paper that was never going to see the light of day again, and somebody sent me an email and said, hey, we can actually make this work with a different project. So Twitter, a surprising new find for me. Mrs. Burns, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, LinkedIn can do a lot for you. I wanted to mention a little bit more about the conferences. I know, right now we're not having them, or we're doing the virtual, but be even more proactive than visiting with people randomly. Kind of scope it out, plot your course, set up appointments. There's people who will call other people or email other people, and I've started doing it because I found out this is what people do, is when you know someone else is going to be at a conference, you say, hey, can we meet for dinner on this certain night? So you already have a window of their time. If they're, wanting to meet with you, you have to kind of be confident and have a reason to talk to them, be prepared with a list of questions. And you should have a reason for wanting to talk to whoever it is you're setting up an appointment with, or at least emailing. After conferences on LinkedIn, I will get on there and ask to be connected with them, so I get to see their feed and see what all they're doing. So that's another way I expand my network. And sometimes they'll comment or react in some way to someone else that may be someone who I want to be connected with because of the things that they're doing. So it's another way to grow your network. So something similar to what everyone else has said here.
Awesome.
I'd just like to add one thing is, so LinkedIn can be very helpful, but the one thing that I think everybody should be mindful is that when you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, don't ever just click the connect button and leave it at that, because there needs to be a context. You send me an invite saying, I want to connect with you, but I don't know where I spoke to you, or I won't remember if we ever spoke. So if there is a context, then you have to say, hey, I was there in this particular thing with you, would like to stay in touch or would like to connect. So LinkedIn is a very good tool. It helps you a lot if you use it properly.
Yes, good advice. Thank you. I will give a plug as well for BioKansas. They offer these type of networking services and type of events for people in the biosciences. Dr. Miller has put some more information about that. We also are doing several BioKansas events as a part of our professional development certificate. And you can find all of that on the Graduate Student Council's professional development website. And we got some other people saying that BioKansas is awesome. So that's good. So I'm glad we could partner with them. So the next question may not work very well for all of our panelists, and some may not have worked in academia, but you can still talk about the interview process in industry. So the question is, how does the application and interview process differ between academic and non-academic jobs? And if you don't have the academic comparison, just maybe talk a little bit about your interview process during some of your positions that you've had.
Okay, do I get to start
You-
in our rotation?
You do.
Okay. So yes, I'm afraid I can't say very much about how the process works in the academic world. But what I would throw out there is that I think we need to break things down even a little bit farther in the non-academic world, because there is a huge difference between how industry works and how government works. So speaking for government, we have a lot of rules and things can take a very long time, just to be completely honest. And in fact, if I put my NGA hat on in particular and how I know things work for us, for all of you, anyone who is interested in getting a job for NGA, it will probably be somewhat of a frustrating process. And things like all of that work that you've poured into making that beautiful, attractive, attention-getting resume that's nicely laid out and is very succinct in terms of your accomplishments and what you can do. We don't even get to look at that at our end, because to get a job in the federal government, you have to go to opm.gov, and everything is kind of a template-driven process where there are specific job openings. You click on what you're interested in, and it brings up a series of questions where you have a limited and defined amount of space to answer each of those questions that are designed to really draw out what you know, what you do, your subject matter expertise, and then information about how you do what you do, some of the kind of leadership and communication and teamwork oriented types of questions, giving you an opportunity to talk about you know, those aspects of your accomplishments. And after that, it just honestly can take a long time. One thing for various government organizations, mine included, you know, if there's something you're interested in, go to their individual public-facing websites and look for things. Most of them at some point in time will be involved in some kind of a government career fair. And sometimes at those career fairs, you will find that there are representatives that have been sent that have some kind of limited authority to read resumes and kind of make conditional offers. It's in the in-person interview is not so key. We rely on driven resume builder kind of thing. And then even before COVID, if we had an interview, it was usually done talking about his experience with interviewing and what led to his decisions with the company that he went with, and what a collegial experience it was. It honestly is very difficult to get that kind of sense from that process, at least for the federal government level. And for that, I think it really just has to be that somehow in you feel that you have that sense of service and wanting to make a contribution, and that this is an area that you know will give you satisfaction from making a contribution, and sort of live with the process that it takes for you to get there, unfortunately.
Yes, government and academia have some similarities in their speed. So thank you for that. Dr. Ara, do you have anything you'd like to add just about the application and interview process?
Sure. I think I would like to take it a step further from what Cheryl said. There's a difference between academia, government, non-profit, and for-profit companies. So the process is very different in all of them. But the bottom line is always going to be you putting your best foot forward. So that is going to be the key in all cases. I can speak, my first postdoctoral position outside of what I did, my first postdoctoral position was in the same lab I did my PhD, so no interview there. The second position was somebody I met at a conference, and she contacted me saying, hey, I have a position, I hear you're graduating, would you like to come work with me? So that was my second postdoctoral position. And my third postdoctoral position was somebody knew that I do that kind of work, and knew somebody who was looking for somebody that wanted that kind of work done. So they just put us together, and we were like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll work for your work. So all my academic positions were through networking. Now, when it came to my current position, the recruiter reached out to me, and I went through 5 rounds of interview. And I work for a nonprofit, and they were different in terms of the interviews I had had with other companies, where I would speak with the recruiter and then there will be just silence. I would not hear from them whether I'm going to the next step or what is going to happen. So one of the key things differences is be ready for rejection. I mean, it's not a bad word. It just, that's how it is. I mean, they may have tons of people they're interviewing, and not hearing from them is supposed to be an indication that you're not going ahead with the job. So be very open to rejection when it comes to finding jobs outside of academia, because nobody has the time. Specifically for this position, I had my first phone interview with the recruiter. Then I had a second phone interview with the team lead. And then I had my third interview was an in-person interview where I met with some of the team members and gave one test. And then my fourth interview was I met with some more team members and gave a presentation. And then my fifth one was when they wanted to discuss the offer. So it went on, and it took close to 3 months before a decision was made. And it took 3 months more. It took 2 months more for me to join them because I had prior commitments with your job. So the other thing is, never drop what you're doing to go join a nice rosy option that you have been presented, because burning bridges is not going to take you anywhere. No matter how horrible your experience is was, there's no point in burning bridges. You never know when you need them again. So the process is going to be different from throughout, but one thing that needs to be constant is your openness to accept the possibility that, hey, you may not get the job.
Yes, thank you for pointing out the difference across the board for those jobs, and rejection is hard, but part of it. Mr. Karmacharya, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so as Dr. Iyer mentioned, if you apply for 100 job openings, you probably won't get any reply from 95 out of them. And you only get reply if you get an interview. That's from my personal experience and also experience of my friends. So, but that does not mean like if you're applying for 100 jobs, have a same template for a cover letter. Like cover letter are really important. So even if you know that you're not going to get a reply, just make sure that the cover letter is specific to that specific job opening and that specific company. Don't just put out a template where you just replace the name of the company and name of the job position. Don't do that. And as far as the interview goes, for the numerous interviews that I had, I've been asked a whole different set of questions. Like if you go into Google and search for the most frequently asked questions, like what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, I've been asked questions like that in my interview as well, and offered a job based on that. And also I've been asked like my field specific questions. So just be ready for everything. Right? It's not decided that who would ask, like which company would ask you what set of questions. You can be asked any set of questions, any set of, and it does not have to be just what you study or what the job description is about. You can be, they can ask you a question where you just don't have an answer at all. I mean, you are not expecting that question to be asked at all. So just be prepared. And interviews, it's like the more you go for interviews, the more relaxed you get. You always learn from your failed interview. Just because somebody called you for an interview does not mean you're going to get an offer. So whatever mistakes you think you made in an interview, learn from that and just be relaxed and on to the next interview. And one more thing that I would like to add is if you're applying for a job in a big company, it's always good to have someone, it's always good to know someone who works there. So in a couple of companies that I applied to for a job, there's a question where it asks, do you know someone who currently works in this company? So if there's someone you know whom you can connect to, then that's a plus point. Your application just shoots way above in the list. So if you think if you see a job opening of some sort in Glassdoor or Indeed or Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever, just try to reach out to someone who works there. Maybe somebody, like in our case, somebody from, since I'm from Nepal, somebody from Nepal, or maybe K-State alumni, or a friend of your friend or something like that. Just try to make a connection to know some people, because not everybody you try to connect in LinkedIn or Twitter answers you. So try to find someone who works in that company, and it just makes the whole application process a lot easier. Even if you don't get a job, at least you'll get an interview, and you can learn so much from each interview you take.
Yes, that's good advice. Every interview is a learning opportunity, regardless of the outcome. Mrs. Burns.
I wanted to add a little bit to what Mr. Karmacharya said about expect anything to be asked of you. I would like to challenge the graduate students to be aware that there are questions that can be asked that are illegal. You know, there's a human resource aspect, and if you're in an interview and someone asks you things that they can't legally ask you, it reflects upon the level of professionalism that that organization that's interviewing you has. And if you go in prepared for an interview, knowing the questions that they can ask you, and if they pop up, then you know you've got to come up with some kind of answer that's general. And you've got to realize who you're working with as far as, and I can't advise you on all that because that's not my specialty, but I know I've worked on boards where I was coached in that because we were hiring somebody, and a guy on our board was real experienced in human resources and knew this stuff. So that's a whole nother aspect. But as far as my field and getting into jobs, it's a little, one way to get your foot in the door is to keep your eye on internships. I know the companies, we're talking private consulting firms or environmental consulting firms, have on their websites, they'll post internships, say for the summer or a semester. If you can get in on one of those, then you don't necessarily have to go through this whole interview process that was discussed just now, because that's kind of where they're trying you out, you know, and it may not pay that much, and hopefully it does pay. I know there's a big debate on Twitter that I've seen before about interns that aren't paid or are paid, and it's a little bit hard. I'm sure we could have a whole webinar on just that alone, but it can get your foot in the door and get you through that process where you don't necessarily have to apply for something and they offer you a job at that company. And you also get to, you know, have a taste of what their company's like. But just visit the websites looking for jobs, and just stay encouraged. Just keep chasing. You're going to find a good fit eventually.
That's great advice. Okay, as we're approaching kind of the last 9-10 minutes of our panel, we have one question that's directed at Mrs. Burns. They would like you to maybe talk a little bit more about the decision process, or how you decided about becoming the head or the owner of your own consulting company. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I will. That was a big deal. I was working for my friend I knew from graduate school, who had been able to start getting a bunch of clients herself, and was having bigger projects that she wanted to team up with. And we were biologists doing consulting work who didn't really know all the business. So I knew we all knew we needed to start our own business. But the reason why I actually do this is because, since I'm the owner, it makes me more flexible with my time and my commitments for what I take on with work. and with family. And I have 4 boys and I juggle a lot. And the ability of me to be in charge of my time is very important with my priorities. So it's still an ongoing kind of thing. The amount of work that I have is getting more and more. And that was my game plan as the boys got older, where they need me less and less. I'm trying to balance that, where I still feel like I'm giving my family the attention they need and able to help with our support the family and do what I have passion for. So that's kind of a complicated answer, maybe. Was there anything else you wanted to hear? Because I could talk for days over coffee about this kind of thing.
I think that answered the question. We got a thank you in the chat. So awesome. We will ask kind of our last question here as we approach the end. Recently, the Graduate Student Council, our Student Affairs Committee, hosted an event called Grad School, What I Wish Someone Would Have Told Me. So as our last question, we're going to ask, is there any advice that you wish someone would have told you when you were a graduate student? And we'll start with Ms. Blake again.
Okay, well, I'll hold it to one maybe instead of the top 3. So the number one thing, and Dr. Burns sort of hinted at this before too, is that success in life is really based at not only what you do, but how you do it. And so I think, again, it's like never too early to start to think about some of those things, like what are you doing that's sort of honing your reputation as a reliable, dependable person, like we heard discussed before, as a good communicator, as kind of a good listener, a good team player. I honestly can't think of any project or issue that the outcome somehow isn't better if it's done as part of a team and part of a multidisciplinary team. And that's not just in terms of topic and subject matter expertise. It's in terms of really understanding and being a little empathetic, listening to what some of the other issues are out there. You don't want to be part of this group that just shuts the doors and goes off and develops some big solution that you think is going to be the best, most elegant answer to some problem ever, but you haven't really talked to and engaged the groups and people that are going to be using this capability. So really understanding what motivations are and what's motivating the people and the issues is huge. So that's a big one. Sort of a corollary, I guess, sorry, is the leadership aspect. And there again, becoming involved in organizations, whether it's student organizations, volunteer organizations, there are many, many things that you can do that show that you are a leader. And that doesn't necessarily mean having some title affixed to your name. It means showing that you are actively involved in reaching out to the stakeholders, that you're actively involved in finding better solutions, or some simple things like tips and hints that other people on your research team could benefit, and taking a little bit of initiative to share that and improve that. So that kind of teamwork and leadership and taking initiative, those are things that in the work world are as huge and will serve you through time as much as exactly what you know from that subject matter point of view.
Great, thank you. Dr. Iyer, what do you wish someone would have told you when you were in grad school?
I wish someone had told me that you don't have to build Rome in one day, or you don't have to build a Rome of a particular kind. It's like you don't have to follow a path that is predetermined. Find something that is different, something that you want to do, something if you don't find a role that fits all your needs, make that role. It doesn't, it just needs one person to think differently for something nice to happen, right? So don't think that you have to, and we often assign timelines, and let's be honest, we need timelines when it comes to experiments. You can't just let them go whenever they want, but you don't have to, like, think about the big picture. Like Cheryl was saying, right? When you're working in your lab and you're doing your things, you think you're solving some big mystery, some great breakthrough is going to come out of it. And that might be true, but just thinking that don't put all your eggs in one basket. Think outside the box.
Really good advice, and not being afraid to turn around if that path wasn't the right one. So thank you. I think we lost Mr. Karmacharya, so we'll have our last piece of advice from Mrs. Burns. What do you wish someone may have told you during school?
Well, I would say look around and go with the people that you enjoy working with in your graduate school to come up with these different ideas, you know, different molds. I like what was just said about if you don't see something that fits you, go ahead and create it yourself, and do it with people you love to work with, which is people around you right now that you like working with. That's kind of hard. It has been a while. That's it.
Awesome, thank you. I think Mr. Karmacharya is back. Would you have any parting advice? What you wish someone would have told you in grad school?
Yeah, so I'd say I'd go with two things. The first one, I wish someone would, like back when I was a student, someone would have guided me and made me realize how to manage time properly. I mean, as grad schools, you'd have lots of free time, and whenever a deadline was approaching, and you just work. So that's not how it is. Just learn to manage your time to meet a deadline and work efficiently. And the other thing I wish someone would have told me is change my lifestyle of going to bed after midnight, because it's going to be really hard once you start to work. Like, go to bed early and wake up early.
Yes, I think a lot of grad students are in for a rude awakening about regular hours. So
Yep.
thank you. All right, well, I will just ask all of our participants, our graduate students and everyone on, to maybe just give a big thank you in the chat or use one of the reactions to thank our panelists for joining us today. We're really grateful for all of your advice and your passion for what you do and for sharing that with us. Sometimes we get down here in the trenches, so it's nice to see that there's life after grad school. So thank you guys so much. And I just want to give a reminder to all of our graduate students as well, that if you are looking to get participation credit for this for our professional development certificate, you should be getting our survey in the next couple of days. And that will be how you earn credit for attending this event. So with that, oh, Dr. Iyer, yes.
Yeah, I just want to say something really quick, is that we spoke a lot about LinkedIn here right now. Just wanted to put a plug in there that when you reach out to somebody, make sure your profile is in shape before you reach out to people, because if you reach out to them and they go back to see who you are and your profile is not up to date, then it really...
All right, well, thank you everyone. With that, we'll end the call. I'm gonna hang on for anyone that has any last minute questions. But with that, that is the conclusion of our panel event. So thank you all for participating today.